Shabbat Shalom, Israel. Shabbat Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to say all praises to Yahweh, Hashem and Mashiach Yahushai. I'd like to send out blessings out to all the Akim that are pushing His truth out in the four corners of the earth. I'd like to send out blessings out to all the Akim that are making pilgrimage to Zion Salakia, to the 3 pilgrimage feasts in which the Most High has commanded all the men of Israel to appear before Him. And I'd also like to send out blessings out to all the Akhawaf that are raising up the children in the way of the Most High, so that when they grow older, they do not depart from the way of the Most High. So firstly, we're going to go into the 3 pilgrimage feasts in which the Most High has commanded all the men of Israel to appear before Him, and then we're going to get into our topic for today, right? So first we're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 16, right? So just read that for me.
Deuteronomy chapter 16 and reading from verse 16. 3 times in a year shall all thy males appear before the Lord thy God in the place which He shall choose, in the feast of unleavened bread, and in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tabernacles, and they shall not appear before the Lord empty.
Right, so the scriptures make it clear that all the men of Israel are meant to appear before the Most High in the feast of unleavened bread, in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tabernacles, right? And it doesn't just say it in one place, it's 3 different places in Torah. So let's get to them, right? Let's go to Exodus chapter 23, and we're going to read from verse 14, right? So just read from verse 14.
Exodus chapter 23 and reading from verse 14
down to verse 17.
3 times thou shalt keep a feast unto me in the year. Thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded thee, in the time appointed of the month Abib. For in it thou camest out from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty.
Right.
And the feast of harvest, the first fruits of thy labors, which thou hast sown in the field, and the feast of ingathering, which is in the end of the year, when thou hast gathered in thy labors out of the field. 3 times in the year all thy males shall appear before the Lord God.
Right, so 3 times in a year, all the men of Israel are meant to appear before the Most High. And again, it mentions the feast of unleavened bread. Then it also mentions the feast of weeks, which he calls the feast of harvest, because that's when it happens during the wheat harvest. And then also it mentions the feast of ingathering, which is just another name for tabernacles. So let's throw it over to Deuteronomy chapter 34. The Salakia Exodus chapter 34, sorry. Salakia Exodus chapter 34. And we're going to read from verse 23 to verse 24, right? And if you want to know what the 3 feasts are again, you can read it. It's the Feast of Unleavened Bread in verse 18. You read down to verse 22, and it says the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of Ingathering. But the Most High makes it clear what He's going to do when we're keeping it 3 times in a year when you read verse 23 and verse 24. So read that for me,
Verse 23, thrice in the year shall all your men children appear before the Lord God, the God of Israel. For I will cast out the nations before thee, and enlarge thy borders. Neither shall any man desire thy land, when thou shalt go up to appear before the Lord thy God thrice in the year.
Right? So 3 times in the year, all the men of Israel are meant to appear before the Most High. It says it again. But then it says, when we start doing that, the Most High said He's going to enlarge our borders, and He's going to make us greater. And He's also going to make it so that nobody wants the land that we're meant to be living in, right? Because there's many nations in that land, many different nations. We are meant to have from the river Nile to the river Euphrates, that whole landmass there. But we don't have that at the moment, right? Shalom, 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 right? So we don't have that. We don't have that landmass that we should have, right? And there's loads of nations in that place. Right, but the Most High is saying that He's going to make it undesirable when we go up to keep the 3 feasts, right? So we should, even if you can't make it for any reason, right, it doesn't mean you can't tell people about it. It doesn't mean you can't lead people there, because doing that can lead somebody there. They might be able to somehow build the house. You don't know that until you actually start to teach people or to tell people about the house of the Most High, because the house of the Most High is important. That place. The place that He chose needs to be rebuilt, and He said He's going to rebuild it. And if you want to be a part of that rebuilding, it starts from you talking about it, and it starts from you teaching people about it. Why? Because we need to understand that now is the time to build the Most High's house, right? Now is the time to build the Most High's house, right? So let's get into our topic for today, right, which is Purim, right? Because we've just come, and we're going to talk a little bit about the destruction of Nicanor as well. Right, because it's around the same time that Purim and Nicanor are. And these are celebrations or feasts that we set up to commemorate the times when the Most High was working with us, right? To commemorate the times when the Most High is working with us. So let's get into it, right? So first we're going to start in Esther, right? Because Esther tells us about the story of how Purim came about, right? And we're going to start in Esther. So we're going to start Esther chapter 1, right? And first you're going to read verse 1 to verse 2.
Mm-hmm. Esther chapter 1, read it from verse 1. And it reads, Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, this is Ahasuerus which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 127 provinces, that in those days when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the palace.
Right? So it says, now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, right? And it says, this is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 120 provinces. So this is in the time of the Media and Persian captivity. This is the time frame that you're looking at, right? And Ahasuerus was a title, right, for a king in Persia. That was the title. So the same way when we talk about Pharaoh, Pharaoh's not the name. It's a title, right? It's a title. And all that's happened is when things are translated, so whenever you see King Ahasuerus, it's like saying King. So it doesn't make sense. But when they've translated it like that, right? But Ahasuerus is a title, right? And the only way to get an understanding is either one, look into the history to see who was around during that time to find out what king it was, and also you can read the Apocrypha. Right, so we can go to the editions of Esther, right, and in the editions of Esther, right. So editions of Esther, chapter 11 and verse 2, right. It says, in the second year of the reign of Artaxerxes the Great, in the first day of the month Nisan, Mardochus, the son of Arius, and son of Simei, and the son of Sisai of the tribe of Benjamin, had a dream, right? So it says, in the second year of the reign of Artaxerxes, right? That's the king. That was the king. That was the Persian king that was around during that time, right? So if you ever hear of the king or the Persian king Artaxerxes, this is who that is, right? And this is around that time, right? So now we're going to jump to verse 4 in Esther chapter 1, right?
Verse 4.
And reading down to verse 12.
When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days, and when these days were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan, the palace, both unto great and small, 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace, where were white, green, and blue hangings, fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple to silver rings, and pillars of marble. The beds were of gold and silver, upon a pavement of red and blue and white and black marble. And they gave them drink, Salakia, and they gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance, according to the state of the king. And the drinking was according to the law. None did compel, for so the king had appointed to all the officers of his house, that they should do according to every man's pleasure. Also, Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Bista, Harbona, Bigtha, and Abagatha, Zephar, and Carsus, the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, the king, to bring Vashti, the queen, before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look on. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him.
Right. So the king was having a festival or a celebration, right, to show the people his riches, and to show them all his riches, all his kingdom, and how great it was, right? And he wanted to show them how beautiful his wife was, right? That's what he wanted to show them, right? But she refused to come to him, right? And because of that, the king was angry, right? The king was angry, right? And what you got to remember is back in the day, they understood the order of things. They understood that. That's just in the ancient world. It's only now things have changed. Things have changed in the Western world, or the Western mindset. They've changed things, right? Because even in the East now, they still have that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
They still have that mindset, right? And it's only the West that has changed or tried to change the order of things, right? Tried to change the order of things, but he called his wife to him, and she didn't come, right? She refused to come, right? So he went to his chamberlains and his council, and asked them what he should do, or how he should go about what's happened, right? Because he was angry, right? So, but he wanted counsel to see what he should do regarding this thing, right? So then let's go to verse 17.
Verse 17, and it reads, "For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes. When it shall be reported, the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but
Right.
she came not.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes, which
Mm-hmm.
have heard of the deed of the queen.
Mm-hmm.
Thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath.
Right.
If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes,
Mm-hmm.
that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she."
Right. So then they said to him that because she's done this now, right? Remember, she's in the spotlight. All the women of Persia can see her. So when she's doing that, they're gonna think it's okay for them to do that, for them to disrespect their husbands. That's what he's saying. She's gonna think they're gonna think it's okay, and then it's gonna arise contempt, and it's gonna arise wickedness and wrath, and all it's gonna do is cause confusion amongst the people. So it says, take her away, put her away, and give her estate, or give all the royalty that you gave to her unto another woman that will come when you ask her to come. Right? That will do what she's meant to do. Right? And then he said, yeah. Right? So then he put Vashti away, right? And didn't want her anymore, basically. Right? So let's continue. Right? So let's go to actually before we do that, right? Go to 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 5.
1 Timothy chapter 3 and reading from verse 5, and it reads, "For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God?"
Right? So the scriptures make it clear that you have to rule your house, right? But to rule your house, you have to rule in order, right? And that's what they understood that in the Eastern world, or not in the East, in the ancient world, as well as in the East now. They know the order of things, right? But you have to know how to rule your own. You have to know how to rule your own home, right? And that's what they were doing. They knew how to rule their own homes, right, in the right order of things, right? Let's go to Ecclesiasticus, right, chapter 26, right, and we're gonna read from verse 24 to verse 26.
Ecclesiasticus what?
Ecclesiasticus chapter 26, verse 24 to verse 26.
Ecclesiasticus chapter 26, reading from verse 24. A dishonest woman contempt of shame, but an honest woman will reverence her husband. A shameless woman shall be counted as a dog, but she that is shamefaced will fear the Lord.
Right.
A woman that honoreth her husband shall be judged wise of all, But she that dishonoureth him in her pride shall be counted ungodly of all.
Right. So even when it came to Vashti, because she dishonored her husband by not listening or not coming when he asked, right, she would be counted as ungodly, even though the because the scriptures or the laws are pertaining to us. So the laws weren't pertaining to them, but in essence, if that was an Israelite, right, or Israelites, then that would be counted as ungodly because they're not honoring or Vashti wasn't honoring her husband, basically, right? So now let's go back to Esther, right, and we're gonna read Esther chapter 1 and verse 20.
Esther chapter 1, and reading from verse 20. And when the king's decree which he shall make shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both to great and small.
Right.
And the saying pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan.
Right. So they made that decree happen, right? So when it went out, then what would happen is that people would be in their right order. They would do what is right. Why? Because they know that if they don't, then they would be put away or put out. Right? They knew that then, and then they knew not to do things out of line. Right? So let's go to Esther chapter 2, right? And we're going to read from verse 1 to verse 2.
Esther chapter 2, and reading from verse 1. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what was decreed against her. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, let there be fair young virgins sought for the king.
Right. So now his council have said, now let's get virgins to come. Let's get a new queen. Right. So now this is where the like a kind of competition begins. Right. A competition begins for the next queen. Right. Because that's what they're looking for. So then they're saying let's bring some fair virgins, right, to bring to the king. Right? So now let's go to verse 5, right? So lucky I didn't pull it up on this screen. So chapter 2, right, and we're gonna read from verse 5. If it wants to load now. Verse 5 down to verse 9.
Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite,
right,
who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away.
Right, so he got carried away during the Babylonian captivity. Right, read on.
And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther.
Right, so Hadassah is Esther's Israelite name. Right, that was an Israelite name. Right, Esther was a Persian name. Right, that was given to her. Right, so read on.
His uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter.
Right, so Esther was his cousin's, but he took her for his own daughter when her parents passed away. Right, verse 8.
So it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to the custody of Hegai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Hegai the keeper, the women
of the women.
And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, which such things belonged to her, and 7 maidens which were meet to be given her out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women.
Right, so when Esther went in, right, she found favor, and you know that was the Most High because it was it was the Most High because Mordecai told her to go in there, right? Because he knew that they were gonna need somehow at some point, or there was a reason why, right? That there was a reason why she should go there because it could benefit her people, right? So let's go to verse 10, right? Esther chapter 2 and verse 10.
Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged that she should not show it.
Mm-hmm.
And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her.
Right, so Mordecai told her, don't tell him that you're an Israelite. Don't tell him that you're a Jew. Don't do that, right? Keep that quiet, right? Keep that quiet for now, right? Because we don't need them knowing that, right? Because that could sway their decision, or it could sway his decision in whether you become the queen or not, right? Verse 12.
Now, when every maid's turn was come to go in to King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months, according to the manner of the women, for so were the days of their purifications, accomplished to which 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of the women.
Right, so she had like a myrrh bath for 6 months, and 6 months with sweet odors, right? Because that's what they used to do back in the day to smell nice, basically, right? And obviously back then they wouldn't like, or even now, like people wouldn't go to, like, if they were going to like royalty or so-called royalty, they wouldn't go there smelling, basically, right? It's the same thing, right? But back then it was more of using like oils and stuff like that, and being in the bath and stuff like that to basically give you a natural good smell, right? So let's go to Isaiah chapter 3 and verse 24.
Isaiah chapter 3, and reading from verse 24, and it reads, and it shall come to pass that instead of sweet smell,
Right.
there shall be sting, and instead of a girdle, a rent, and instead of well set hair, boldness, and instead of a
stomacher,
a stomacher, a girding of sackcloth, and burning instead of beauty.
Right. So these are curses. Right, these are curses. So that's why now you don't get that same sweet smell that you get. Instead, you get more people not smelling good, stinking, right? Instead of having nice hair, right? You've got women out here with bald hair, like they don't have like hair on their head, right? Because that's those are curses. Like when those things come on people, they're curses, right? Because people aren't in their right states, right? And they need to come back to the Creator. They need to come back to the commandments of God, of the Most High. Because when you come back to the commandments of the Most High, when you do the things He says, right, then those things will go. Those things will go. Why? Because the things He tells you to do are to keep those things flourishing, are to keep those things, keep your body working the way it should. But people don't want to follow the Creator anymore. There's a lot of people that don't want to follow the Creator. That's why there's only a few people that do the work, because the scripture says that the harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few. Because there's not many people. The scripture says that many are called, but few are chosen. Many are called, but few are chosen. So there's gonna be few people out there that want to turn back to the Creator. Very few. But you can't be disheartened at the fact that there's only a few people going to the Creator. You have to stay steadfast, or you have to stay strong, because if you're looking at numbers, you're never gonna find the numbers. You're never gonna find the numbers, because even Elijah, who was a mighty prophet, right? He said that there was nobody with him, or that the Most High should just let him die now. And he says no, because I've got 7,000 people that have not kneeled there kneel to Baal. Right, Dan, just because they weren't literally with Elijah doesn't mean they weren't there. They were there because he had 7,000 people that he was still working with. So even though you're in your place and where you are, and you might think, well, nobody else is doing it. It doesn't matter if nobody else is doing it where you are. Who knows where the Most High has somebody else doing something? Right? You have your portion and they have their portion. They have their place. Right? Just because you're not seeing it doesn't mean it's not happening. Right? It's the same thing with like because I know there was like a saying that they used to say, like, Does a tree that falls on its own still make a sound? Of course it makes a sound. You just don't hear it because you're not there. Just because you're not there, it doesn't mean the sound didn't happen. The sound happened. The sound happened. So likewise, when it comes to not seeing other people or not seeing a lot of people doing it, it doesn't matter. And even then, we are seeing a lot of people coming back to the Creator now. We are seeing a lot of Israelites, but all you got to do is look for it. That's all you got to do. There's loads of people out there. Loads of people out there. Right? You can see men, women, and children coming back to the Creator. Loads. There's tons of camps. Two, there's loads of people like because the camps call some of them individualites, the ones that are by themselves, but there's loads of them. There's loads. So all you've got to do is look at that or look for that, right? So let's go back into Esther, right? Esther chapter 2, and we're going to read from verse 13 down to verse 17.
So, sorry, I just want to say something, right? First, before I say anything, all praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Mashak Yahweh Shai, and Shabbat Shalom to the family, right? Just going back to that it's supposed to be a wise saying that tree thing. Now that tree thing is so idiotic, right? So stupid. But when people say it, they think they are saying something with great wisdom, great knowledge and wisdom. Does the tree, if nobody's there, if a tree falls over, does it make a sound? Does it make a sound? If you don't know how idiotic that statement is, because I'm not around. Okay, so you're in say you're in London, or I'm in London. You're in Birmingham, right? Now, just because you're not around me, does it mean I don't fart?
No, it doesn't.
Does it mean I don't belch? Does it mean I don't speak? What the hell? What the hell are they talking about? What the hell are they talking about? The noise comes from vibration. So wherever something causes a vibration, if there are eardrums to pick it up, they will hear the noise. But if there's no eardrum there, that noise, that vibration still goes out. It doesn't stop just because there's no ear there or eardrum there to pick it up. That don't make no sense, and that's why this kingdom's crumbling. That's why it has to crumble, because they will put things out there to sound like they're wise, like they have great understanding, right? But when you actually check out what they bring out, it's actually a load of garbage, a load of gibberish, a load of nonsense, right? Because they're not living in the real world, mentally or spiritually. They're not living in the real world. They're living in some made up universe in their own mind, as if to say, just because somebody's not there, there's no noise, right? So that type of foolishness, right? What they spout out there is just a sure sign of the state of this kingdom that we're in, because they make many statements like that. Who came first, the chicken or the egg? Right? Who came first? What came first, the chicken or the egg? That's another no-brainer. And they think it's something really, really wise, what they're saying, something great. Oh, you don't know. Is it the chicken? Is it the egg? Is it the chicken? Is it the egg? Right? Because they got nothing better on their minds. Their minds are not settled. Their minds have not rested on what you call again? They call it common sense. But the real thing is sense is not common. It's not common. right? It's not common, right? So not everybody has common sense because it's not common. If it was common, you wouldn't be having madness happening all over the world. But I don't want to rant or go on, so I'm gonna pass it back over to you and let you continue. So like, yeah.
Right, so let's go back into Esther. Right, we're gonna go from verse 13, chapter 2, verse 13.
And it reads, Then thus came every maiden unto the king, whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the women, to the custody of Shahagaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. Now, when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but what Hegai the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed, and Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her.
Right, and that was the Most High that got her favor. Got her favor with everybody that looked on her, everybody that talked to her, everybody that was around her. She got favor, right? Because the Most High was bringing this about, and he brought it about for a reason. He made her become the queen for a reason, right? But that comes a bit later on, right? Verse 16.
Verse 16. So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgin, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti.
Right, so he made Esther queen, right? So she took the place of Vashti, right? His previous wife, right? Because he split from her and he went and got Esther, right? So she attained favor and became the queen, right? So let's continue, right? Verse 18 down to verse 23.
Verse 18. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast, and he made a release to the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet shown her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus.
Right. And so Mordecai was sitting in the gate, right, as he always did, right, because he was checking on Esther to see what was going on and whatever, and that's where he was always, like congregating or around, right, or posted, yeah. But the there was two of the king's chamberlains, right, Bigthan and Teresh, right, and it says that they were rough, basically. So they kept the door, right, but they were angry and they wanted to lay hands on King Ahasuerus, right, or Ahasuerus or Artaxerxes, right. So again, like I said, King Ahasuerus don't make sense. Ahasuerus means king, right? It's just a Persian word for king, like Pharaoh is the Egyptian word for king, right? So now he's seeing these two chamberlains and that they wanted to lay their hand on the king, right? Verse 22.
And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen, and Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name.
Right, so then Esther went to the king and told the king that what was going on, and told him about Mordecai, and told him Mordecai told her this. So that way his name was there, right? Verse 23.
And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king.
Right, so it was written in the book of Chronicles before the king, right? So there was a book now that this was all written in. So Mordecai's name is written in this book, and you'll find out why the Most High made that happen later on as well, because all these things that fit into place, you know it's the Most High that made this happen, because everything falls into place. Everything falls into place, right? So let's now jump to chapter 3, right? We're gonna read verse 1 to verse 2.
After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hamada, the Hamedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him.
Right, so he set Haman as second in command, and Haman was an Agagite, right? Who is an Edomite, and he's Esau, right? He's an Edomite, right? So he's been set in second in command under Persians, right? Persian. So there's a Persian king, and he's set an Edomite as second in command over all of his people, right? So he says, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him, right? Verse 2.
And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman.
Right, so all the king's servants, they were all for it. They bowed to Haman, right? Read on.
For the king had so commenced Haman.
Had so commanded concerning him. Right, so that's what the king had commanded, that they reverence him. Right, so these people are bowing, right? And then what did Mordecai do?
But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence.
Right. So he didn't bow to him, or didn't give him reverence. Right, because the only reverence you should be giving is to the Creator. That's the reverence you should be giving. That's who you should be bowing to. You shouldn't bow to a man. The only bowing you should do is doing to the Creator. Right? So let's go to editions of Esther, right? Chapter 16. I'm going to pull that up on the screen as well. Right, and additions to Esther is basically the book of Esther, but it goes into a bit more depth on certain aspects of the account, right? So additions to Esther, chapter 16 and verse 10, right? So just read that for me, because we're gonna look into Haman, right? We're gonna look into Haman.
Additions to Esther, chapter 16, and reading from verse 10. For Haman, a Macedonian, the son of Amadatha, being indeed a stranger from the Persian blood and far distant from our goodness, and as a stranger received our...
Right, so there you can see he talks about Haman, right? And he says a Macedonian, right? A Macedonian, right? And that's the headquarters for Greece, or the Grecian kingdom. That was their capital, Macedonia, right? And who was dwelling there? Who was dwelling there? The Edomites, Esau, right? And that's how you know. And it says, being indeed a stranger from Persian blood, right? So meaning he wasn't a Persian. He's telling you he was not a Persian, right? And we're gonna go a bit more in depth into that in a moment as well, right? So let's go to back to Esther chapter 3. Right, and we're going to read on now from verse 3 onwards to verse 7.
From verse 3, chapter 3. And it reads, Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, Why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman, to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew.
Right.
And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath.
So Haman was angry. Right. Haman was angry because he wouldn't bow to him, and Mordecai basically told him he's a Jew. Right, and he won't bow to him because he only bows to the Creator. Right. Verse 6.
And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai.
Right, so then they showed him the people of Mordecai, showed him the Jews. Right, read on.
Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus,
Right.
even the people of Mordecai.
Right. So because of this now, at first he only wanted to kill Mordecai, but as soon as he found that he was a Jew, then he wanted to kill all the Jews. Right. And that is the classic Jacob versus Esau story. The classic story. That story hasn't ended yet. That story has not ended yet, because that burning anger towards Israel is still within Esau now. It's still within Esau now. So you see how as soon as he found out that he was a Jew, and then he found out he was a Jew, all of a sudden he wanted to kill all the Jews. Right? Verse 7.
In the first month, that is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that is the lot, before Haman from day to day, and from month to month, to the 12th month, that is the month Adar.
Right.
And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all the people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasuries. And the king took his ring from his hand, and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy.
Right. So when he took the ring is like a seal. So he could seal a letter or a decree to basically say that send out a decree so that they could kill the Jews or kill the Israelites that was in the land, right? And basically saying it's not profit to have them in the land when they're keeping the laws of the Creator, right? The laws of the Creator. But this is what he was trying to spin a whole story to the king. That the Israelites were evil, right? And because they were keeping the laws of their God or the Most High, right? They were a problem, and that it wasn't good for the Persian kingdom, right? So then, so now he's given the enemy of the Israelites a charge to actually kill us. That's what he'd done at the time. Right, so I just want to go back a bit, right? And I'm gonna go to additions to Esther 12, right? Additions to Esther 12. I'm gonna pull it up on the screen. Right. So here, right. So this is additions to Esther chapter 12 and verse 6. It says, "Howbeit, right, Ammon, which is Haman, the son of Amathus, the Agagite, who was in great honor with the king, remember, second in command, sought to molest Mardochæus," right? Mardochæus is just Mordecai, but it's said in a different way, right? Translated in a different way, right? Sought to molest Mardochæus, meaning to kill him and his people because of the two eunuchs of the king, meaning he was working with the two chamberlains, right? That was going to kill the king. Right, he was working with them. Right, why was he working with them? Right, and that's what we find out. We'll find out a bit later on as well. Right, but it's showing here that he wanted to kill Mordecai not just because he didn't bow to him, but because he foiled his plan. He foiled his plan of killing the king. He foiled his plan. Right, so it wasn't just one thing, and this is why reading the Apocrypha is important, because without the Apocrypha, you wouldn't get that part of the story, or you wouldn't get that part of what happened, or that part of the account. Right, that's why it's important. Right, so I'll tell you what. Right, let's go back to additions to Esther 16. Right, and we're gonna read that bit because this tells us what his plan was. Right, so we read verse 10, right? But we're going to read from verse 10 down to verse 13, right? So just read it for me.
Additions to Esther 16 and verse 10. For Ammon, a Macedonian, the son of Amadatha, being indeed a stranger from the Persian blood,
Right, so he's not a Persian.
And far distant from our goodness, and as a stranger received
Right, because he was a stranger to the Persians. He wasn't a Persian. Right, read on.
Had so far forth obtained the favor that we show toward every nation, as that he was called our father, and was continually honored of all the next person unto the king.
Right.
But he, not bearing his great dignity, went about to deprive us of our kingdom and life.
Right, so he didn't bear his great dignity, meaning that he didn't really respect the level that he was at, right? And he wanted to destroy their kingdom, right? Verse 13.
Having by manifold and cunning deceit sought of us the destruction, as well as Marduk.
Right, so he wanted to kill wanted to kill the king, and he wanted to kill Mordecai and the Jews, right? And he says he wanted to kill Mordecai, who saved our life. Right, read on.
And continually procured our good, as also of blameless Esther,
right,
partaker of our kingdom with their whole nation.
Right.
For by these means he thought,
right,
finding us destitute of friends, to have translated the kingdom of the Persians to the Macedonians.
Right. So he wanted to translate the kingdom of the Persians to the Macedonians. He wanted to take it from the Persians and bring in the kingdom of Esau. Right? And eventually that did happen, because that's when Greece took over, but that wasn't the time for it. That wasn't the time for it. But Haman was an Edomite. He was a Macedonian. He was a Grecian. Right? And he wanted to kill the king and become king himself. Right? And have that kingdom. Right? That's what his plan was. Right? But he was upset and he was angry because Mordecai would not bow to him. Right? Mordecai would not bow to him. Right? So if you read verse 15 as well.
But we find that the Jews, whom this wicked wretch have delivered to utter destruction, are no evildoers, but live by most just laws.
Right. And it says, but live by the most just laws, right? Because he's tried to say that because we keep the laws, we're not a benefit to their kingdom, right? That's what he said to them. But they're saying, well, we found out that they're not even wicked. You just lied, right? They live by the most just laws, right? And now he's delivered them to destruction, because at that point, he'd already sent out the decree to have them killed, right? But then another decree goes out later on, but we're going to get to that in a moment, right? So let's continue on, right? So we're going to jump back to Esther chapter 3, and we're going to read from verse 11 to verse 15.
Reading from verse 11, and it reads, And the king said unto Haman, The silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seemeth good to thee. Then were the king's scribe called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written, and sealed with the king's ring.
Right.
And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old.
Right. No respect to our persons, man. They wanted every single Israelite dead, young, old, right?
Little children
and women. Right. Read on.
In one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey.
Right.
The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The posts went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed.
Right, so he sent it out into all the cities, right, all the provinces that were under the Persian kingdom, right? I remember when they had the kingdom, it wasn't just small; it was a load of places, and that's why it says it hastened hastened by the king's commandment. Why? So they were ready for the day, right? So they sent out a load of people with this decree, so that way any Jews that were in the area, right, they were giving the Persians or the people that are around them the right to kill them, right? They made a decree for that, right? So let's go to Esther chapter 4. Right.
Esther chapter 4, and reading from verse 1. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and a bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was a great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing, as many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. Then called Esther for Hatach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So Hatach went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the Jews and to destroy them.
Mm-hmm.
Also, he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king, to make supplication unto him, and to make requests before him for her people.
Right, so at this point, remember, he told, Mordecai had told Esther not to tell him or tell the king that she was an Israelite or that she was a Jew, right? But now he's saying you need to go into him, right? And you need to tell him, you need to make supplication, you need to make him, right, stop the decree, right? So that way, so that he stops the decree, and that there's no decree going out there for your people to be killed, right? But you gotta understand that in that time you couldn't just go into the king, you couldn't just go into the king's chamber or the king's room, because he had to call you first. If you just walked in, you'd be killed, right? Verse 9.
And Hatach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again, Esther spake unto Hatach and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days.
So she's saying anybody that just walks in without being called, then there's one law that they're going to be put to death, right? Except if he puts the golden scepter out, but there's a chance that he won't do that, is what she was saying, right? And he goes, I haven't been called in for that though, so I could die if I do it, right? Verse 12.
And they told to Mordecai Esther's word. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house, more than all the Jews.
Right, so I'm saying, don't think you're gonna escape what's coming to your people just because you're in the king's house. If your people get killed, then you're gonna get killed too, because you haven't tried to help. Right, verse 14.
For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall there enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed, and who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?
Right, so he's saying that if you hold your peace now, right, the deliverance is going to come from somewhere else. But because you didn't do something in a place where you can, then you and your father's house are gonna be destroyed, meaning that your lineage or the people that come from you are gonna be destroyed, right? And he goes, but who knows if you were put in this position for this, even though he knows that she was put in a position for this, right? But he was saying to her, what if you are put in a position for this, right? Which she was, because she was put in a position of power. She was put in a position of power. She was the queen to the Persian king, right? Verse 15.
Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer: Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise. So will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish.
Right, she was willing to die for her people. Right, she went in. She said that make the people, or the Jews that are in the land of Shushan, right, fast for 3 days. Don't eat or drink for 3 days. And she says she's gonna get her maidens to do that too. Right, and then she's gonna go into the king, because she was making supplication to the Most High to say, you know, if I go in, right, spare me,
Mm-hmm.
right, make it so that he has favor on me, and so that when I speak to him, I can get him not to kill my people, right, to kill your people, Most High, because the Israelites are his people, right? Verse 17.
So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him.
Right. So let's continue, right? Give me a moment though, because yeah. So Esther chapter 5, right? We're gonna read from verse 1 to verse 2.
Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight.
Mm-hmm.
And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter.
Right. So there, right, she went in, right, into the king's court, right, and he put out the golden scepter. Right, he put out the golden scepter, but with that, it just gives you a small overview. Right, it gives you a small overview. Right, but in additions to Esther 15, it goes into more depth, right, of how this exchange happens, right. So we're gonna go to additions to Esther 15, right, and we're gonna read from verse 1.
And it reads, and upon the 3rd day, when she had ended her prayers, she laid away her mourning garments and put on her glorious apparel.
Right, so she stopped her fasting, right, and now she put on a nice garment, right.
And being gloriously adorned, after she had called upon God, who is the beholder and savior of all things, she took 2 maids with her,
right,
and upon the one she leaned, as carrying herself daintily, and the other followed, bearing up her train.
Right, so holding up her long dress, right, read on.
And she was ruddy through the perfection of her beauty, and her countenance was cheerful and very amiable, but her heart was in anguish for fear.
Right,
Then,
so she was afraid, man, because she was going to walk in there, but she didn't know what was going to happen. Right, verse 6.
Then, having passed through all the doors, she stood before the king, who sat upon his royal throne, and was clothed with all his robes of majesty, all glittering with gold and precious stones, and he was very dreadful.
Right, so he was very dreadful, right, read on.
Then, lifting up his countenance that shone with majesty, he looked very fiercely upon her.
Right, looked fiercely upon her, as if to say, oh, who's that? Who's just walked in? Right, read on.
And the queen fell down and was pale,
right,
and fainted,
right,
and bowed herself upon the head of the maid that went before her.
Right, so she fainted because she was afraid, because of how he looked at her. Right, verse 8.
Then God changed the spirit of the king into mildness.
Right, so the Most High changed his changed his spirit, right, so that he was mild. Right, read on.
Who in a fear leaped from his throne.
Right, so then he got scared because she fainted. Read on.
And took her in his arms till she came to herself again, and comforted her with loving words and said unto her,
Right, so he comforted her now and was saying loving words unto her, right? Verse 9.
Esther, what is the matter? I am thy brother, be of good cheer.
Right.
Thou shalt not die through our commandment, be general, come near.
Mm-hmm.
And so he held up his golden scepter and laid it upon her neck.
Right, so
and embraced her.
So when it says that he put out the golden scepter, it doesn't tell you all of this bit.
Mm-mm.
It doesn't tell you all of this bit. This goes into more depth of how it happened, right? So she walked in, and he looked on her with fierceness, but the Most High made his heart mild, right? So so when she fainted, he got scared, right, and came over to her and tried to help her. Was trying to help her and trying to cheer her up and trying to bring her around and to find out what she wanted. Why was she coming here?
Mm-hmm.
To come and talk to me, right? So he was concerned. He was concerned for her at this point, right? Verse 12.
And embraced her and said, speak unto me.
Uh-huh.
Then said she unto him, I saw thee, my lord, as an angel of God, and my heart was troubled for fear of thy majesty. For wonderful art thou, Lord, and thy countenance is full of grace. And as she was speaking, she fell down for faintness.
Mm-hmm.
Then the king was troubled, and all his servants comforted her.
Right. So all the servants comforted her, but it doesn't tell you about that in the canon or the so-called canon,
mm-hmm.
right? But let's find out what Esther said to the king now, right? So we're gonna jump back to Esther 5, right? And we're gonna find out what she said to him when he asked her, when he asked her what she wanted or why did she come there, right? So verse 3 onwards.
Then said the king unto her, what wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be even given thee to the half of the kingdom. And Esther answered, if it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther hath said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom, it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, my petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king hath said. Then went Haman forth that day, joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai.
Right. So even though he was gonna have a banquet and he was gonna be able to be there with the king and the queen, right? Because he was joyful then. He was like, oh, I'm actually getting some sort of reverence. I'm actually gonna be here. It's just gonna be me, the king and the queen. Right, and he was happy until he saw Mordecai, and then he got angry because this one man would not bow to him. Right, one man would not bow to him, and it irked him. He was angry. Right, it really bothered him. Right, and I don't know why one man not bowing to you is affecting you so much. Right, and that just shows the pride of Haman. Right, it just shows the pride of Haman. Right, so let's continue on. Right, verse 10. You're reading from verse 10.
Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king.
Right, so he went home and he was a happy man. He was telling them how he got promoted, how he'd been put second in command and everything. Right, verse 12.
Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther, the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared, but myself. And tomorrow I am invited unto her also with the king.
Right, so he's like, and even Esther hasn't let anybody else come in to the banquet that she's preparing for me and the king. Like nobody else is going in there, and he's happy, right? And he goes and then listen to what he says now, verse 13.
Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's
Right,
gate.
and all this means nothing as long as I'm seeing Mordecai just sitting there at the king's gate. Right, so now listen to the counsel of his family. Right, verse 14.
Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king, that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made.
Right, so now he caused gallows to be made because his family and friends told him, make a gallows for him, right, and then ask the king to kill him when you go to the banquet tomorrow, right? So now let's go to Esther chapter 6. Right, Esther chapter 6.
And on that night could not the king sleep.
Right, so now the Most High put it on the king, so he could not sleep that night. Right, read on.
And he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles.
Right, so remember how when Mordecai told about the chamberlains, it was written in the book of Chronicles before the king. Right, read on.
And they were read before the king, and it was found written that Mordecai had told of that Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus.
Right.
And the king said, what honor and dignity have been done to Mordecai?
Right. So he says, so what's been done for Mordecai because he saved my life? Right. Read on.
Done for him. And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the
says, then said the king's servants that ministered unto him.
Oh, Salakia, there is nothing done for him. And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he prepared for him. And the king's servant said unto him, behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor?
Right.
Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than myself?
Right. So now he's thinking, because now the king's asked him, what should I do to somebody that I really want to honor? I want to do something for. Right. And he's thinking to himself, well, who else is he going to want to do something for other than me? Right. Because it shows his pride. Who else is he going to want to do something for? Right. Verse 7.
And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor.
Right. So now he said all of this because he says, make him allow him to wear your crown, your royal garments, and take him through the town. Make one of your princes take him through the town on horseback and proclaim, right, before him that he's honored by the king. Right. So now he thinks this is all going to happen to him. Right. Verse 10.
Then the king said to Haman, make haste and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken.
Right, so now he's told him, go and do this to Mordecai, right? So he's telling him he's the prince that's got to take him around the city, right? Verse 11.
Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor.
Right.
And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hasted to his house mourning, and having his head covered.
Right, so Haman was upset, man, and he ran home to cry, to have to sulk, to go and be upset. Right. Verse 13.
Verse 13. Then took Haman, 13, yeah, and Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, if Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him.
Right? So they basically told him that if he is a Jew, if he's an Israelite, and you've begun to fall, because they already knew, man, they knew of the history of the Israelites and how when Most High fought for them, right, there was no way you was winning. Once you begun to fall, it was done from there, right? And he said, you're not going to win. If you begun to fall now, that's it, you're done. Right, verse 14, and while this was being said to him, right, verse 14.
And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared.
Right, so now he's getting pulled to this banquet now, right, before the king and the queen, right?
So the king and Haman came to the banquet.
7. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, chapter 7. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, if I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given at my petition, and my people at my request.
Right, so now they're at this banquet, right, and the king's asking Esther, well, what's your request? What do you want? And even if you want half the kingdom, I'll give it to you. Right, even up to half of the kingdom. And then she says, I'm gonna make petition for my life, right, and her people, right. And what does she say? Verse 4.
For we are sold, I and my people,
right, because we were put into captivity,
to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish.
Right, because Haman, right, was saying he was going to put money into the he was going to pay for the Jews to be killed as well. So because that's why she said we are sold, I and my people to be destroyed. Right, read on.
And to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue.
Right, but we weren't sold in slavery. We were sold to be killed. Right, read on.
Although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage.
Right.
Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, who is he and where is he that durst presume in his heart to do so?
Right, so she said to him, well, we're sold to be destroyed and slain. Right. And it goes, the enemy could not countervail the king's damage, right? Meaning that he's come to destroy us, or he's come to kill us, right? And he's used your seal to bring this about, right? And then he asks her, who is it? Who's done this? Right? Who's the one that wants to destroy you and your people? Right? Verse 6.
And Esther said, the adversary and enemy is the wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen.
Right, so just imagine in the room, and now having this banquet, right? And now that she's gonna said that, he's quaking in his boots, man. Verse 7.
And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden, and Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen. For he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king.
Right, because the king was angry, right? And he was trying to beg Esther for his life, right? Verse 8.
Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the palace of the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was.
Right, so now he's begging for his life, right? And he's on the bed where Esther is, right? Because when they used to eat back in the day, they used to kind of like lie down to eat, like kind of like, I don't know, on their side, and whatsoever. And he's have like the like a picnic, right? And he's had the banquet like that, right? But he's begging for his life now, right? And he's on the bed, right? Just him and Esther, right? Haman and Esther, and his king's walked back into his chamber now, right? And what does he say then? Then said the king.
Then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house?
Right, meaning that is he trying to force himself? Is he going to force himself on the queen as well before me now as well? Right, read on.
As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face.
Right, and Haman's face got covered, man. He got put in one of those bags, right? His head got put in one of those bags, right? Verse 9.
And Harbonah, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman.
Right.
Then the king said, hang him thereon.
Right. So the same gallows that Haman had made for Mordecai, right? He was hung on those gallows, right? Verse 10.
So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified.
Right. Then the king's anger went away because he got what because Haman got what he deserved. Right. Haman got what he deserved. Right. For trying to kill. He tried to cause genocide. Right. He tried to cause genocide. Right. So Esther chapter 8.
On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen, and Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai.
Right.
And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman.
Right. So all the glory and everything that was under Haman, right? He set it under Mordecai. Right. Read on.
And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews.
Right, so she was crying to the king, saying, "We need to stop what he's done, like the decree that he sent out to kill the Jews. Right, stop it from happening." Right, verse 4.
Then the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king,
right,
and said, if it please the king, and if I have favor in his sight, and the thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen, and to Mordecai the Jew, behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hands upon the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Write ye also for the Jews as it liketh you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring, may no man revert.
Mm-hmm.
Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is the month Sivan, on the 23rd day thereof. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants and the deputies and rulers of the provinces, which are from India unto Ethiopia.
Right, so that's how big the kingdom of the Persians was, right? Read on.
And 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing, and according to their language. And he wrote in the king Ahasuerus' name, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey.
Right, so anybody that comes against them, they were given the right to fight for their lives. Right, they were given, so the Israelites were given a right to fight for their lives wherever they were. So anybody that came against them, they could kill them. Right, anybody that came to kill them, they could kill them. They were given that right. Right, by the king. Right, verse 12.
Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th day and the 12th month, which is the month Adar, the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemy. So the posts that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment, and the decree was given at Shushan the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel, blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness, and joy and honor, and in every province and in every city wheresoever the whithersoever the king commandment and decree and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day, and many of the people of the land became Jews, for fear of the Jews fell upon them.
Right, but there where it says they became Jews, people can't become Jews. You are a Jew by lineage, right? Or you're an Israelite by lineage. Right? When it says they became Jews, it means they started following the commandments, right? So they became like us. They didn't become us. You can't be an Israelite without being an Israelite by blood, right? But you can follow the law, statutes, and commandments of the Creator, right? But you can't literally become an Israelite without being from that lineage or from that seed line, right? So let's go to Esther chapter 9.
Now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had ruled over them that hated them, the Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people.
Right, because they all knew that when the Most High was working for them, it was done from there, right? Verse 3.
And all the rulers of the provinces and the lieutenants and the deputies and officers of the king helped the Jews, because of the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men.
Right.
And Parshandatha, and Dalphon, and Aspatha, and Paratha, and Adalia, and Aridatha, and Parmashta, and Arisai, and Aridai, and Vajesatha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hamadatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they. But on the spoil laid they not their hand. On that day, the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. And the king said unto Esther, the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee, or what is thy request further? And it shall be done. Then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow, according unto this decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. And the king commanded it to be so to be done. And the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day, also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan. But on the prey they laid not their hand. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemy, and slew of their foes 75,000. But they laid not their hand on the prey.
Right. So on the 13th and 14th day of the month, they fought for their lives, right? Verse 17.
On the 13th day of the month, Adar, and on the 14th day of the same, rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness.
Right. So they made it a day after that. They made it a day of feasting and gladness, right? Read on.
But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th thereof, and on the 15th day of the same they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwell in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both nigh and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar and the 15th day of the same yearly, as the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them, because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast Pur, that is the lot, to consume them and to destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against the Jews, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Wherefore they call these days Purim, after the name of Pur.
Right.
Therefore all the words of this letter and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them.
Right. So when you hear the word Purim, right, it's named after the name Pur, right, which is because they cast lots, right? So it says, and had cast lots, that is cast Pur, that is the lot, to consume and to destroy the Israelites, right? So when you use the word Purim, right, the im on the end is just plural, meaning lots instead of lot, right? Verse 27.
The Jews ordained and took upon them and upon their seed and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it would not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing and according to their appointed times every year.
Right, so every year on the 12th month, right, on the 14th and 15th day of that month, right, they kept the feast. They kept the feast of Purim, right, the feast of Purim, and that was to remember, right, the time when the Most High saved us from the Persians, or from, well, not so much from the Persians, yeah, but from Haman, right, from Esau, right, from Esau, right, because wherever we are, Esau seeks to destroy us, right, wherever we are, right, and now they're ruling, right, they're seeking to destroy us now, right, they're still seeking to destroy us now. That hasn't changed, right. So read on, Salakia. Verse 28.
Yeah. And these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation,
right,
every family, every province, and every city, that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them that perish from their seed. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm the second letter of Purim, and he sent the letters unto all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed, the matter of fastings and their cry. And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book.
Right. So these days were appointed, right, from it's the 14th day and the 15th day of the 12th month. And on those days, you remember that the Most High saved us from the Persians and from Esau during that time, right? And he had made all of these things happen in order for us to be able to fight for ourselves, right? Even in our captivities, right? The Most High will give us, the scripture says that he's going to be our sanctuary. He's going to be a little sanctuary to us, right? And there's been many times where he was a little sanctuary to us, right? It was been many times, right? And it's just like even with the day of Nicanor, which is on the 13th day of the same month, right? And on that day, right, because that was to do with Alchemist, he was an evil Israelite that wanted to be high priest over Israel. So because they wouldn't let him be a high priest because of things he'd done in the past, right? He went to Demetrius, right? He went to Demetrius, who was the king of one of the kings of Greece, right? And he said to him that he's talking to him about Judah Maccabees, right, and saying that he was causing uproars and wickedness in the land and blah blah blah. Basically saying what Haman was saying, like when Haman was saying to the Persian king that they're no good to be there because they're just going to stifle what you're doing, right? So then because Alchemist did that, right, that wicked Israelite did that, right, Demetrius, the king of Greece at the time, right? He had like a high command or general, right, called Nicanor, who he knew hated the Israelites, hated the Jews, and he said to him, "Go down there and go down there and go and kill them," right? And I'm gonna do like a shortened version, right? Because I'm gonna get the point that the scriptures get to, right, when it talks about Nicanor, because he does something that is just out there, right? He he literally went to the house of the Creator and said that he was gonna burn it down, right, kill people, and then raise up another temple in its place to his God, right? So we're gonna go to Second Maccabees chapter 14, right? Because he came there for Judah Maccabees, right? That's who he came there for. Right, and he said he was saying some wild stuff outside of the temple, right? So this is what he said, right? So one more view chapter. Right. So it says verse 30, right? So at this point, right, because they kind of made a truce, Nicanor and Judah Maccabees, they made a truce at some point, right? Because Nicanor saw that there wasn't anything untoward going on or anything bad going on, so they made a truce, right? But what happened is because nothing was happening, right? Alchemist wasn't happy, so he was going back to the king and saying, "Well, he's not doing anything." And then Demetrius was asking, "Why has nothing been done?" So now, now Nicanor had to go and finish what he came to do, right? So he didn't even keep his little truce that he had, right? Which is what Esau was like anyway, right? So verse 30, right? So Second Maccabees chapter 14 and verse 30. So read down from there.
Notwithstanding, when Maccabeus saw that Nicanor began to be churlish unto him, and that he entreated him more roughly than he was wont,
right?
Perceiving that such sour behavior came not of good,
right? So because now he was like, he noticed that his attitude changed towards him, and he knew no good was gonna come from him being around him, right? So read on.
He gathered together not a few of his men and withdrew himself from Nicanor.
Right, so he withdrew himself and went away because he was like, nothing good's gonna come of this. Right, verse 31.
But the other, knowing that he was notably prevented by Judas's policy, came into the great and holy temple and commanded the priests that were offering their usual sacrifices to deliver him the man.
Right.
And when they swear that they could not tell where the man was whom he saw.
Right, so they were saying, we can't tell you, we don't know where he is and whatsoever. So now listen to what he does, right? Verse 33.
He stretched out his right hand toward the temple and made an oath in this manner: if you will not deliver me Judas as a prisoner,
right,
I will lay this temple of God even with the ground.
Right, so he said he's going to level the temple, read on.
And I will break down the altar.
Right, and he's going to break down the altar.
And erect a notable temple unto Bacchus.
Right, so he said he's going to erect a notable temple unto a false god. Right, and he said he made an oath, meaning he made a promise, saying that if he doesn't get Judah Maccabees, right, he's gonna kill him. He's gonna destroy the temple. Right, he's gonna destroy the temple and erect another temple. Right, and he wanted him as a prisoner, but they were saying no, we don't know where he is. Right, so let's go to Second Maccabees. Right, 1 second. Yeah, Second Maccabees chapter 15 and verse 28. Right. So read from verse 26.
Reading from verse 26. But Judas and his company encountered the enemies with invocation and prayer.
Right, because they made prayers to the Creator, man. Before they went out to fight, they made prayers to the Creator. Right, verse 27.
So that fighting with their hands and praying unto God with their hearts, they slew no less than 30 and 5,000 men.
Right, so 35,000 men they killed. Right, read on.
For through the appearance of God, they were greatly cheered.
Right, read on.
Now, when the battle was done, returning again with joy, they knew that Nicanor lay dead in his hand.
Right, so they won the battle and they killed Nicanor. Right, they killed Nicanor. Right, but then what they did then, right, is just to show, right, that what he did was wrong, right, absolutely wrong, and the Most High would have made them do it to prove a point. Don't make oaths that go against him. Don't make promises against him and against his people, right? So read verse 28.
Now, that's what
read verse 29. So like, yeah.
Then they made a great shout and noise, praising the Almighty in their own language. And Judas, who was ever the chief defender of the citizens, both in body and mind, and who continued his love towards his countrymen all his life, commanded to strike off Nicanor's head and his hand with his shoulder and bring them to Jerusalem. So when he was there and called them of his nation together and set the priests before the altar, he sent for them that were of the tower and showed them vile Nicanor's head and the hand of that blasphemer, which with proud brags he had stretched out against the holy temple.
Right, so they showed him the hand, they cut off his hand, right, and showed his hand, right, because he put his hand out towards the temple, right, verse 33.
And when he had cut out the tongue of that ungodly Nicanor, he commanded that they should give it by pieces unto the fowls and hang up the reward of his madness before the temple.
Right, so he gave it by pieces to the fowls, right, just to make a point, right, that was the reward, right, for his wickedness, right, for his wickedness, right, and then read verse 35 and verse 36.
He hanged also Nicanor's head upon the tower, an evident and manifest sign unto all of the house of the Lord.
Right.
And they ordained all with a common decree in no case to let that day pass without solemnity, but to celebrate the 13th day of the 12th month, which in the Syrian tongue is called Adar, the day before Mordechai's day.
Right, which is the day before Purim, right? So you celebrate, you celebrate and commemorate that day, the destruction of Nicanor, on the 13th day of the 12th month. Then on the 14th day and the 15th day is Purim, which is what they call in Mordechai's day, right? Which is called in Mordecai's day, but the day or the feast is actually called Purim or Purim, right? But we remember those days. Why do we remember those days? Because those are days where the Creator, right, saved us from our enemies. And the Most High has done that many times, but the times where he's done it, we need to, because the Most High shows his power in those times. Because when the odds are against us, because the odds are stacked against us in a lot of these situations, right? But without him being there, we would have been destroyed. That's just the facts of it. That's literally the facts of it. Right, but the Most High is a glorious and mighty power, right? And because he has mercy on his people, even in our low state, he's had mercy on us. Because if he didn't have mercy on us, man, if he didn't have mercy on us, we would be completely destroyed. But just because he's got mercy on us, don't mean we should not turn back to him. It don't mean we should not turn back, because his mercy has stipulations, and he has mercy on those who want to turn back to him. That's who he has mercy on. He don't have mercy on everybody, right? Because it's only those that truly believe or truly understand him, right, that he won't impute iniquity on. If anybody's just wickedly going out and doing wickedness, he's not going to forgive you for that. He's not going to forgive you for that. In the times of our captivities, because there was those of us amongst us that actually believed in the Creator and actually prayed unto him and actually wanted to keep the law, statutes, and commandments, we were saved in these times. So to remember these times is a good thing, because it gives us the understanding that when we do what's right, the Creator will protect us and He will fight for us, right? And He will fight for us, right? So I hope you got something from today's live regarding the feast of, or the day of Nicanor and Purim. But what I'm gonna do is now I'm gonna pass it over to my Ak, who's gonna talk about his word of the day, or Hebrew word of the day, which I'm gonna pull up in a moment. I'm just trying to pull it up on the screen. This is what you do today, because it's got like 3 there in one. I don't know why. So yeah, I'm gonna put it up on the screen now. Share screen, window.
Screen too. Maybe it's not going to let you pick a window, is it?
There we go.
There we go. So shalom. Like I said, welcome to the next section. Like I said, we got a new segment. So if you tuned in and you stayed all the way to the end, we go into a Hebrew word at the end of our lives now. And it's just to break it down so we get a feeling of the language. Like I said, the scripture requires us to become like babes again. So we're learning the Aleph Tav, or what the English people try to translate to the alphabet. So we're relearning, and we're becoming like kids, so we can learn from the Most High again and learn correctly. So an apt word is what we're going to look in today, the Hebrew word for Torah, because it's very important that we understand Torah and why we keep Torah, what it means. And even my act, like even in you went into Purim, even that's just something small that what you can do, you can pick up. So like my act said, he mentioned that you have per, which is just a lot, and then the yum, why the yum makes it plural. So when you have eam or yum at the end of a word, that makes it plural. So these are just little tricks that you'll pick up, and little what's the word? They're like literature, like devices that you pick up and you understand when you learn the Hebrew. So, like I said, the same way we went through it before, and we've gone through a couple. We went through faith. We've done teshuvah, which is repentance, and now we're gonna go through Torah. So it's made up phonetically of tha, wa, ra, and ha. And if we go through each symbol, we start with the pictograph, because that's the most ancient, and we know from what it is, from what the picture is, and what they try to change the symbols to, we know that that's a cross, or like cross sticks, and people relate that to the actual cross, because which our Messiah was hung on, and that has the spiritual meaning of a sign, a mark, or a covenant. Then we follow that up with the phonetic wa, which is a tent peg or a nail. So if you look in the pictograph, then you go to the paleo, and then you can see the modern script and how they've changed it. But they're all meant to look the same. They're all meant to look like a tent peg and nail. And we know from our last word, because we've had this in previous words. So like I said, you'll start to build up like a list of things that you can start to remember. This means spiritually to secure, to add to something, or to fasten something, to make something stick, that's followed up by the resh, or in the phonetic, the sound would be a ra. And this picture is the head of a man. And obviously the paleo one's meant to be like a man facing the side also. And it's slightly different in when it comes to the modern, because obviously that's where they've made the most changes. That's what they try and put in a lot of manuscripts and stuff now. So that's, if you go to Israel now, what you're going to see most of is like the modern script. So it's helpful to know what you're looking at when you're reading the Hebrew. So we know it's the head of a man, and we know that Reish or the Ra sound is a head. So like the first of something, the top or the beginning. So we relate this to the Most High because he is the head of man and he is the first. We relate it also to Messiah, Yahushua, because he was the first created and he is the beginning of creation. So he's the one who also begins creating. The Most High gave him the building blocks, and then he's the one who starts to enact it. Because like my elder says, even in our understanding of business, you will understand that you have the CEO or the person who does a blueprint or something. Say they're on a like a building site, and it's not the actual person who designs the house. It's not the architect who comes down and actually does the building work. They have other people who are in like a line, but the designer of all things is the creator. And then the person who's going to enact everything would be the Messiah. So the head can be both. It can be Messiah and it could be, but first it would be the creator. So to finish out, the last one would be the Ha, and that would make Tha Waraha Torah. So that's why they say it like that. And we know what this is because we've definitely had this in our Hebrew word before, which is the Hey, or which would be the Ha sound. And we know from the pictograph it's supposed to be a man with his arms raised, or meant to be like someone praying, or some people say that it's like a window because that's what the picture denotes. And that is the breath. It means that you can say there because you're revealing something, and it means to look and have spirit and get spiritual understanding. So like I said, we've gone through all of them. So now what we do at the end, or what we like to do, is try to piece together some form of understanding. Now in Hebrew, certain words have like root meanings and words. So the word Torah has roots in another Hebrew word, which is moreh, and the word moreh in its understanding means to throw, and Torah in its meaning can mean to be like a dart or what's being thrown, because as teachers or as people who read the scriptures, we're meant to be giving Torah, we're meant to be giving out Torah. So what I came up with for the definition of Torah based off what we can see in the spiritual meanings is to hit the mark and to keep the covenant of Yahweh through adding or securing the instructions from Yahweh, so that he's the head, he's the top, he's the beginning. That's where we get our instructions from, and to receive the spirit and a good understanding, because to get a good understanding from the instructions, that's where we have to go back to. And that's why we use Torah. That's why one of the things we try to do now as well when we're reading through the scriptures, if we know that it's in what they call the so-called New Testament, we try to precept it to show you where it came from. Because like Ma'ak says, when Messiah spoke, he was quoting from places. He was always quoting from Torah. You can't have one without the other. It's like having, like Ma'ak says, like a torch without a battery. So that's the Hebrew word, and very important, because that's how we're going to receive understanding. It's how we're going to receive instruction, and it's how we're going to hit the mark. And that's why it's important as well, because in hitting the mark, in using the terminology or the picture in our head of archery, it can show how people can misuse it or not be accurate in following Torah. But for us to use it correctly, we have to hit the mark. We have to try and follow the instructions to the best of our ability. So I hope that that breakdown of the word gave you a little understanding into how Torah breaks down in the Hebrew. I don't know if you have any ideas on how you would, because like I said, the Torah and the scriptures, they're ever unfolding. So other people might see something else in the spirit. But like the elder says, the important thing about Hebrew is the meaning of the actual pictograph. It doesn't change. So you can get other things, but the root is always going to be, it's going to be solid. The foundation's always going to be solid. So that's the Hebrew word of the day. And I hope you got something, and see you next week where we'll have another Hebrew word. And I'll hand it back to you.
Did you want to add something, Aldo?
I was going to just to add a bit to it, right? Because the word. I mean, if you're gonna say it in if you're gonna say the word in Lashawan Kodash,
Mhm.
it's sawara,
Mhm.
sawara, right? Because you drop the a at the end, right?
Mhm.
Now, in the modern linguistics of it, they all say Torah, because some people say that there's the vowels are there, right? Which there's an argument either way, So I'm not there to quibble against pronunciation, right? Although pronunciation is important, don't get it twisted, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is what the word actually means, what the letters actually mean. Those they never change, right? So I'm going to use the word Torah, right? Because we know it in this modern time as Torah, right? So it says a sign, a mark, and covenant, right? So that's the beginning of it. Is the sign, the mark, and the covenant. That's the beginning of the word itself. So there has to be a sign, a mark, or a covenant made, and that happened with Adam. The sign and the mark and the covenant was made with Adam when Adam sinned. Because when you read the scriptures tell us that all of us come from Adam, right? So everybody who's on earth today, they come from Adam. So initially, right, that covenant, that mark, and that sign was set at the days when Adam was on earth, right? Then secondly, you have what, right? To secure or to add or to fasten, right? So to secure means the Most High has to secure something in the earth. What was that? What was he securing in the earth? He was securing his the words. He was securing his spirit. That's why he raised up men like Enoch, like Methuselah, like Jared, like Arphaxad, right? He was securing, right? He was adding, right? Right? Because he had to bring something else in to get to another point, right? Because remember, this is all over time. And what the Most High is showing is although we say the word as one word, that one word is an expanse of time, right? Because in the beginning, we didn't receive what the humans did not receive what the Most High wanted for humans, because we had to learn certain aspects. Okay, we had to learn certain aspects of living here and learning about the most important thing is learning about the Creator, right? Because you're born. When you're born, you got to learn about everything that surrounds you. You don't know it as soon as you come in. You got to learn it, right? So he had to secure and fasten it, and the main fastening of the covenant and of the mark and of the sign that came with the children of Israel, right? That came with the children of Israel, right? So that was the main securing and fastening of what the Most High wanted to set in the earth, right? Because from Adam to the children of Israel, it's only one lineage of people, and then that lineage of people comes into a nation in the earth, right? And then once it comes into the earth, it's never going to be taken out of the earth, right? The house of Israel will never be taken out of the earth, right? Then it goes to the next word, right? Which is head, first, top, or beginning, right? The head is talking about Messiah, who comes out of Israel. Messiah, the head, right? The head, right? The first, who was first? Messiah, right? Top, who is top? Messiah, right? The beginning, who was there at the beginning? Messiah, right? And through Messiah, right? Then we from Messiah now, then we can move to Ha, right? Which is to look, right? Declaring something, right? Then to look, what you're looking at, you're going to behold the kingdom of heaven on earth, right? And to reveal what's going to be revealed, the total and the full knowledge of the Creator, right? Through who? Messiah, right? And then once we receive all that, the breath is spirit. The scripture tells us that he breathed the breath of life into man. That breath in this instance represents everlasting life, which was what man was intended to receive when man was first created. But man had to learn how to serve the Creator and do what is right according to his laws, his statutes, and his commandments, and how to live in this environment, in this paradigm, right? Then we will receive the everlasting breath, right, which is life itself. And that's why the word Torah, which says hit the mark, right? But hit the mark, right? What does Moses say about Torah? He says, I have set before you here what?
Life and death.
Life and death. So Torah is life and death. So from the beginning of the creation to the kingdom, right? That's what Torah is about. Learning Torah, learning the commandments of God, learning about the Creator. That's what it's all about, right? So it's very, very important word, Torah. It's a very important word, right? For getting or gaining understanding of the Creator, right? Right. I've just skimmed over it because there's many precepts, that are linked to this. And I've paraphrased and quoted a few scriptures. But if we was to go into it, we'd be here for another maybe 2-3 hours just on this one word, right? Just on this one word alone, right? Because it's so in depth. But your understanding of Torah is good, right? It's a good understanding. But the main part of Torah is to achieve everlasting life. That's what it's about, to achieve everlasting life, right? So with that, I'm gonna pass it back over to you so you can close out or do whatever you're gonna do.
All right, so to close out, we're gonna do the final 4 scriptures that we always do when we speak about the gospel of the kingdom. Right, so I'm just gonna bring up the scriptures on the screen. So we've got Isaiah chapter 8 and verse 20. Right, let's just read that for me. Yeah.
Isaiah chapter 8 and reading from verse 20. To the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them.
Right, to the law and to the testimony, to the song of Moses and to the song of the Lamb, to Torah and to Messiah. If you're not speaking according to that word, right, it's because there's no light there, right? You need Torah for order, and you need Messiah for redemption. One without the other doesn't make sense. Torah spoke of Messiah and Messiah spoke of Torah, so both go hand in hand. And it's like Ma'ak was talking about, the saying that I say, you can't have torch and without batteries, and you can't have batteries without a torch, because you ain't gonna get light from just the one of them. You need both of them to get the light, right? It's just the same thing with this. In order to get the light, you need to be talking about both Torah and Messiah, right? Torah and Messiah, right? So then let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 3.
And it reads, but if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost.
Right, so if our gospel's hid, it's only hid to those that are lost, either those that don't want to know and will never be found. Why? Because they don't want to be found. Or there's those that will find it at a time when it's suitable for them, right? Because the Most High knows the time and the season for people to get the understanding. It's just that some people have to go through harsh things to get the understanding. Like Apostle Paul, when he was on the road to Damascus, he was knocked off a donkey and made blind to get the understanding. And some people, because things are going to get worse than they are now, so some people, it's going to take all that stuff to kick off for them to be like, hang on a second, what's going on? And then they're going to get the understanding, right? But if you've been woken up now, you've been woken up early for a reason, right? So that you know before the time comes, right? Meaning that the Most High could wake you up, without having to like shock you into being awake, right? Without having to shock you into being awake. It's like because Israel as a nation, we were dead, right? And you know when they use that what they call defibrillator, right? They have to shock them to be awake. So some people have to have that shock to get their heart beating again, their spiritual heart beating again, right? That's what's happened. That's what has to happen to them, right? But those that don't have to, and they can just come back around, right? Those are the ones that have been woken up a bit earlier, right? But some people will get the understanding in their time and in their due season, right? So let's go to Matthew chapter 24 and verse 14.
And it reads, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end
Right,
come.
so the gospel of the king is going to be preached in all the world. Why? Because we were scattered to the four corners of the earth. Right, and it's a witness to all nations. Why? Because it's a witness to us to say, get yourself ready, because the kingdom's coming in, and you've got the chance now to get yourself ready and prepared, because you're going to have to keep the commandments there. And also, it's also a warning to the nations to say, let us go, because the longer you keep us in captivity, is the worse the judgment is going to be on you. Right, and they need to understand and know that. So the word is going out, it has to go out to the four corners of the earth, so people know and understand that the Most High declared the end from the beginning, and the end is his kingdom on the earth. Right, so let's go to Matthew chapter 26, and we're going to read from verse 6.
Matthew chapter 26, and reading from verse 6. Now when Jesus was in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box of very precious ointment, and poured it on his head as he sat at meat. But when his disciples saw it, they had indignation, saying, to what purpose is this waste? For this ointment might have been sold for much, and given to the poor. When Jesus understood it, he said unto them, why trouble ye the woman? For she hath wrought a good work upon me. For ye have the poor always with you, but me ye have not always. For in that she hath poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this, that this woman hath done, be told for a memorial of her.
Right, so no matter wherever this gospel is preached, right, the gospel of the kingdom, the memorial of this woman has to be spoken of. Why? Because when the Messiah came, he didn't come speaking his own words. He came speaking the words of the Father that sent him. Right, and the Father said that any words that I put into his mouth, which you don't listen to, is going to be required of you, and you'll be destroyed from among the people. So we're going to listen to the words that the Messiah spoke, because he's coming with the words of the Creator. Right, and she comforted him at the time when he was going to go through the tribulation, and without him going through the tribulation first, we wouldn't have had this second chance. Right, he had his beard pulled out, he was spat on, and he was hung on a tree. Right, and that should sound familiar to us, because why? Because our people went through that too. He just went through it first, and he didn't even sin. He followed the law, statutes, and commandments to the T. Right, to the T. So the fact that he did that and then died for us, right? This is a small thing we can do to memorialize this. Right, so no matter wherever the gospel of the kingdom is preached, we're gonna memorialize this woman. Right. So with that, we are gonna say Shabbat Shalom. More peace and blessings. Check out our website, IsraeliteHeritage.com, our Facebook page, Israelite Apostolic Heritage. Also, check out our individual pages. I'm Iba Solomon. You got our elder in the live as well, Thakawa Shalama. I'm at behind me, Yardan Ben Yasharala. And you can message us if you want to. DMs are always open. You got questions, anything, you can always store them out to us. And we won't really mind or anything. So did you have any closing statements to say? Or closing statement said, Amalda?
Yeah, just Shabbat Shalom to all the families, to all the Mishpachah. And as I said, it's not going to change. What I'm going to say is that keep the faith, keep the faith and endure. You know, keep walking on the straight path, right? And endure all things, because no matter what happens, if you stay or stick with the commandments of the Creator, and stick within his guidelines and have faith on Messiah, right? Then you're 90% there. You're 90% there, right? The other 10%, I don't know. That's between you and the Creator. But if you keep the laws and statutes and commandments and you have faith, the scriptures say that those will inherit the kingdom of heaven. That's what the scriptures say. Right, where you will inherit, what position you'll have in heaven, that's not up to any man to say. That's between the Most High, the Father, and Messiah, and they will determine. The Most High will instruct, Messiah will execute, right? But you will enter the kingdom, and as King David says, or was it King David? No, it was Samuel. Or was it Samuel? It might have been King David who says I'd rather, I think it's David said, I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of the Most High, right? So it doesn't matter what position. If you're in the kingdom, you're in a blessed state. No matter what position you're in a blessed state compared to the rest of the world who are not in the kingdom or not reckoned in the kingdom, right? So keep your faith, endure, and fight the good fight until the end, right? And with that, I'm going to say Shabbat Shalom, Wabati Walama, and all peace and blessings in the name of the Most High Yahweh and His only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai.
Do you want to say anything?
Just Shalom, like Alda said. He said, all endure, keep the faith, and finish the race, innit? Keep fighting the good fight, and stay in the scriptures, man. Stay in Torah, because that's the way, like Alda said, that's how we get the kingdom. That's how we're going to get the correct instruction. That's how we're going to get a good understanding, by keeping the commandments and doing them to the best of our ability. And with that, I'll just say Shalom.
So with that, we are going to say Shabbat Shalom, all peace and blessings. And we're going to say Wabati Walama, and all praises to Yahweh, B'Shem HaMashiach Yahweh Shai. Amen. And Amen.